Hello.
Hello,
Hey, this is MJ.
MJ. How's it going?
Hey, it's going well. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic.
Awesome. Great to hear.
Yeah, I'm excited for this interview. When you contacted me and you said that you wanted to talk about your world travels, I was really keen.
For sure. Well, me too. I like talking travel. I like listening about travel. I like talking travel. I like eating travel, sleeping travel.
You live and breathe it.
I live and breathe it. It's definitely one of my passions, if not the biggest passion.
Awesome. So I mean, yeah, feel free. I mean, you have the next 30 to 45 minutes of our undivided attention. So yeah, tell us all about it. How did you get into it? Where did you catch the travel bug? Where have you been? All that kind of stuff.
All right. Well, the easiest thing to do is definitely start with where I started with travel. Like what gave me the desire or the interest to travel? And it's, I guess it's fairly an easy question because I would say it starts when I was 18 because 18 was when I took my first trip, or I call it my first real trip because it was the first time I took an airplane.
Well, wow.
And
Yeah.
it was the first time I took an airplane. I mean, I'd been to Montreal before that because I grew up, just outside Toronto,
Okay.
and Montreal was an easy trip. But, I took a few camping trips when I was a kid with my family. But yeah, it was when I was 18. I was actually at a friend's birthday party. It was his 19th birthday. And I was there with my friend, his sister, and their parents. And the sister says to the parents while we're all sitting down to eat that she's unable to take this trip, this family trip to Las Vegas, which was coming up in a few weeks because she had a drama commitment at school. She was in drama class and I guess performing in a play.
Right.
So I just remember her dad getting very upset, like, oh my God, this trip's coming up in 3 weeks. You're telling me this now? And so I just said I need to get up and get another plate of food because it was an all-you-can-eat buffet. And when I came back, my friend's dad says to me, he goes, MJ, how would you like to go to Vegas in 3 weeks?
Wow. Nice offer.
And I was just speechless. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, I don't know what to say. Like, yeah, I can't just take, her spot, And he says to me, he goes, you know what, my daughter can't go. She's expressed that she's got these bigger commitments and the trip is already paid for. I've got this empty seat. All I have to do is change the name on the ticket and it's
Wow.
yours.
Wow.
And I'm thinking to myself, I'm 18. I don't have any money. I don't, how do I?
But it's Vegas.
Vegas too. I know. And being 18, it was sort of like, I feel like any 18, 19-year-old wants to go to Vegas at some point, for a
Definitely.
weekend getaway. So yeah, so I didn't really have a choice. I almost didn't have a choice because he basically said to me, like, you're coming if you're able to. And I'm thinking to myself, well, can I get I think it was 4 days, 3 nights. Can I get this time off?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer was, well, yes. Like, it really wasn't a big deal to take this time off. I might have had to miss a day of school. But, yeah, so that was it. So 3 weeks later, I just remember going with, my friend and his two parents. We went to Las Vegas and getting on an airplane for the first time. It was so exciting. Like, I remember the feeling of taking off, which I still get that same feeling every time I take off in an airplane. It's almost like, I think I even said, I have this vague memory of saying, it feels like being on a roller coaster or something like that. And I feel like I remember my friend's dad kind of giving me his serious face, like, don't talk about it like this is just some ride. Like, you were on an airplane, let's hope we get there safely.
The superstitious one. Yeah.
Yeah, like I remember, it's a vague memory, but I remember saying, I'm sure it was that, and him expressing like,
Yeah.
hang on to your seats.
Yeah.
Like, not that he was afraid, but it's like, it's not a ride.
Definitely.
We want to get
those tense moments during takeoff, right? We all deal with it differently. Some people are just sort of totally relaxed. I'm sort of, eyes forward, hands on the armrest. Definitely. Don't talk. Don't talk about roller coasters. We're on a plane.
Exactly.
So,
And actually, these were the days. So this would be 2005, I
right.
guess. Yeah, 2005, I guess. but these were the days where when the plane landed, everybody clapped.
Yeah, I still remember those. Definitely.
Remember those days? It was almost like being at the movie theater, and at the end of the movie, everybody claps. Clapping for who? Well, the movie, but yeah, I just don't see these things done anymore. I mean, on an airplane, when you clap, it's to say to the pilot, like, "Great job, you got it, seriously."
You got it your life. Yeah.
So, but yeah, that's that was my first trip. I was 18, my first flight, and it was really exciting, the whole thing. And I think that's what sparked the interest.
Wow.
It made me think, I want to get back on an airplane someday. I want to travel. And I was 18. This was at the same time I had just kind of turned my life around. That's almost another story. But 18, I was turning my life around, focusing on being good to myself, my body, and desiring something more out of my life, something better, you know? Because I guess it wasn't long after that trip that I got what I call my first real job, because I wasn't just working for someone under the table. And what I did was I remember, because it was February that I went to Las Vegas, and it would have been May that I started my job. And so I worked for 1 year in retail.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And this story is going somewhere, so just hang with me for a minute.
We're with you.
Because as I was working, this was also around the same time I was graduating high school and working this job. And so I was making money for the first time, really,
in
my life. And, other than a little bit of pocket change, I was actually making my own money. And so I worked for 1 year. I remember 12 solid months I was working, and I really wanted to save money. And why was I wanting to save money? What was the motivation? Well, I remember part of it being that I wanted to travel. I wanted to explore the world, and I wanted to eventually leave this small town that I'd grown up in, just a little outside Toronto.
Okay. Right.
And I wanted to get out of this small town, right? I was changing my life, graduating high school. There was no work opportunities. There was no colleges or universities in school, even though that my head wasn't in that space where I was thinking about college or university at the time.
Right.
I just wanted to change my life. I wanted to find happiness. I wanted to find my purpose. I wanted to, I remember I wanted to see the mountains. That was actually a really big motivator for me, because
Interesting.
yeah, I don't know where in my life I thought I wanted to see the mountains, because I know I saw some mountains in Las Vegas, and maybe that's part of it, but I always liked landscapes.
Okay. Yeah.
Like, I always found a sense of beauty out of landscapes, and in this small town where I grew up, although it's beautiful, it's in a nice valley, but there's no mountains, there's no ocean. And watching TV, movies throughout my life, I mean, you see these exotic places, and the only way you can actually see and experience these exotic places is by going there. You can see them in pictures and movies, but if you want to see the mountains and experience what mountains are like, or the ocean, or the jungle, or, if you want to go scuba diving, or you want to see the desert, ride a camel through the desert or something like this, I mean, you have to get out of...
You got to be there.
You got to be there. And I just... I mentioned I was working for a full year.
Mm-hmm.
I was saving my money. And I wanted to eventually get out. I wanted to move away, start a new life somewhere, a new person, new me, new place. And so what I did to save money, because here's an important part to traveling, and a lot of people ask me, like, well, how do you afford it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
how do you afford it?
Definitely.
Like, that's a big one for a lot of people.
It is.
And for me, I didn't have any help from my family. I mean, I was lucky. I do consider myself lucky that I was able to be living with my mom at the time, rent-free, for like 18 to 19 kind of thing, while I was working.
Mm-hmm.
And I was skateboarding in the evenings, because that was also a big part of my life. I used to skateboard a lot. So instead of, buying alcohol, which I, had spent a lot of my teens doing, right, wasting money on that, and smoking. Right. I used to smoke in my teens, wasting money on that. I quit smoking. I was now, I limited my drinking. I major league, limited my drinking. So I wanted to save all my money so I could finally get away. And that's what I did. I spent my evenings skateboarding so I could save my money. And after this 12 months, I had just under $10,000 saved. I think it was like $9,500.
Yeah, wow, that's good to start off with at that age.
Yeah. Yeah, we're talking Canadian dollars,
Mm-hmm.
you know. I would say that's pretty good, especially working a minimum wage job. I think it started at either $7.75 or $8 an hour.
The single digit days. Yeah, I remember those. Yeah.
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 And so
10 G's at 19 years old. And yeah.
Mhm. So 10G is 19 years old. You could say that I got the travel bug maybe in Vegas, because it's hard to pinpoint exactly, right? But after that 12 months working on the job, I quit my job and I said, I'm going to travel. I wasn't really saying I'm going to travel the world, but I said I'm going to travel. I'm going to get out of town. I'm going to move somewhere new. And I wasn't thinking I'm just going to travel for a couple weeks or a couple months and come home. No, I packed my bags with the intent to leave.
Wow.
Like I'm not coming back, or at least I don't know yet if I'm coming back.
And how was your mom? Were you close with your mom? How was she with that?
Yeah, I was definitely close with my mom. Actually, at the time, I didn't have a relationship with my dad.
Right.
It was sometime in my 19th year that I contacted my dad for the first time in years. And again, that's like another story. But I was close with my mom, and I was living with her. And I remember it being a bit of a hard pill to swallow for her. Like, well, it would be different if I was just leaving town to go to a university and I could come back and visit on weekends or that kind of thing. But
Mm-hmm.
I was leaving, right? And she didn't know where exactly I was going to be, right? She was worried about my safety and that. So I remember her being sad, but also very much encouraging. Like, you do what you have to do.
That's great. Are you an only child? Do you come from a big family? Like, were the only child sort of flying from the nest, or do you have brothers and sisters?
So I have a younger brother and 3 older sisters.
Oh, okay. So it's
And
not
so
like
yeah.
it's like you're the only little bird sort of flying from the nest. She had some other ones around.
Well, yeah, that's actually a good question because, since there was 5 of us kids, and I'm the second from the youngest,
Okay.
so you could sort of call me a middle child. When it comes to families of this size, it's often the case where the oldest children have it the hardest because, the parents, I don't know, maybe it's a stereotypical thing, but want to be overprotecting. It's harder to break parents in with the older child. But as you work your way down, like the middle child has it easier, and then the youngest child has it the easiest.
Pretty much do whatever he wants.
Yeah, because the parents have grown lenient.
Right.
And this is just an observation. There probably is some science to back this up. But whether or not there is, it's just something that's been observed, not just from myself, but a lot of people have talked about this.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't know, as a middle child, yeah, my parents were, specifically my mom was encouraging of me, as much as she wanted to be protective and that kind of thing. She just encouraged me to do what I wanted to do, essentially. I mean, she tried to set rules when I was a kid, but I kept breaking rules, So when I said I needed to leave town, for me, it was one of those things that she could accept.
Right.
So actually, from there, just, I could share just a little bit more about what happened next.
Yeah, please.
Because what happened next is, and this is sort of like critical part in the story, because this really marks the beginning, as I think of it. I think of this as the beginning of my journey. I was 19. I quit my job, which felt amazing.
That's always a nice feeling, eh?
Yeah. Working in retail and saying I quit. It was great. And I left. I had this money in my pocket. I said all my goodbyes to everybody. And before I left, of course, I bought a nice big backpack for my back, and I So I never carried a suitcase is what I'm saying. In the beginning, it was
Wow.
like, I want a backpack on my back. I want to rough it. Like I want to,
To the stars. Yeah.
yeah, like I'm not going to go stay in a hotel and, live a luxurious life. I want to kind of rough it for wherever I'm going. So I finally, I said my goodbyes to all my friends and family, and I made my way to the airport. I had my big backpack on my back, my small backpack on my front. I had my skateboard with me. I had hiking shoes.
Wow.
I had, my bag was so heavy because I was just a beginner, right?
Was this all carry-on, or were you checking that bag, or?
I was checking that bag.
Oh, okay.
And I mean, a question maybe your listeners are asking yourselves, like, well, where am I going? And how did I decide?
That's my question.
So where did I decide to go? I decided to go to Kelowna, British Columbia, Canada.
Wow.
Of all places.
Of all places.
And it was a really hard choice because I really wanted to go to New Zealand. Like, I had my heart set on New Zealand. Because as I was, between the ages of, let's say, 18, 19, as I was thinking about traveling, at the time I also was really interested in The Lord of the Rings movie.
Okay. I see where this is going now.
Yeah, because there's that sense of adventure. Like some people get this sense of adventure from maybe video games or just,
Movies.
For me, when I was a kid, we used to go play in the forest, and there was that sense of adventure. Well, at 18 years old, 19 years old, I sort of resonated. Lord of the Rings kind of resonated with me as like wanting to go on the sense of adventure.
Definitely.
Right? So that was mostly filmed in New Zealand. But I eventually decided not to go to New Zealand. I decided on British Columbia because I had some sort of distant cousins there, which is like another story. It's like some cousins that we found through my mom's brother because he was adopted and met his biological family. So it was like some relatives that we had met once, and I thought, well, maybe I'll go there. Plus, it's British Columbia. And
it has mountains.
Exactly. That was actually a huge reason. That was like maybe the primary reason why I wanted to go to Kelowna. But also, like, I don't know, as teens, a lot of people talked about BC. It's like that old saying, all roads lead west. There's just something about British Columbia that's beautiful,
Oh, yeah, no, I wouldn't argue. I mean, it's on our license plate, right? So, yeah, I'm trying to pitch you a 19-year-old in small town Ontario, and people are saying, BC, man, that's where it's at, I don't know, in the skateboard culture and stuff, like, if Vancouver is sort of a Canadian mecca for skateboarding, or, I don't know, like Kelowna. I mean, Kelowna's been on the map for the last 20 years or so. It's sort of a very up-and-coming city.
Yeah, it is. And actually, you mentioned something about the West Coast that made me think skateboarding. Skateboarding is big. When we think of the West Coast, or at least when I say we, I mean me and like my friends at the time, we would think skateboarding, which is, mostly in California. We'd think California, like hot weather, West Coast. Well, Kelowna, in my mind, was getting pretty close to the West Coast of Canada. And I didn't,
Ontario.
Yeah. And I also had interest in going to California. But in any case, I decided on Kelowna. And I had no plan whatsoever other than that. I decided I could go to Kelowna. I booked a flight there. I don't even remember if I contacted these relatives. I may have. But
wow, hey. So just flew to Kelowna and that was it. No hotel reservation, nothing.
Well, actually, no, there was one bit of planning in there, and that was that I did reserve accommodations 3 nights in a hostel.
Wow. So still very bare bones, 3 nights. I mean, after 3 nights, you don't know what you're doing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. 3 nights is really not very much. I mean, I went in, I guess it was May. Yeah, I'd say the end of May 2006. No, 2007. 2007 is when I took that trip. So, yeah, 3 nights, I guess I wasn't there in peak season, so I didn't really have to worry about if I wanted to extend my nights. But I'd never stayed in a hostel before. I don't even know where the idea of staying in a hostel came to me. I have no idea. Somewhere along the lines, I must have learned that, backpackers hostels. And so I booked my stay there. I didn't know how I was going to get to the hospital from the airport. So, it's for a lot of people, you might think, oh, that's easy, just catch a taxi. Well, although I had some money in my pocket, I was, I've always hated taking taxis, because I've always been kind of like a saver, right?
Right.
Saving my money, kind of living frugally, right? Putting my money where, I don't want to spend it on the taxi. I want to spend it,
On
scuba
doing
diving
something. Right.
or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, so when I arrived at the airport, it's kind of like, okay, now how do I get to the hostel? And I remember now I took a shuttle bus. So I guess there must have been like a shuttle bus kiosk. And, it would have been a lot cheaper than the taxi.
Definitely.
Right.
$10 or something, or $5 even.
I don't even remember. It was probably, I'd say around the $15 mark, okay. Maybe around there.
Yeah, the airport in Kelowna, is that sort of like it's a ways from the city, isn't it? Like it does take a little bit. It's a bit of a commute.
You know what? I do recall it being a little bit of a commute. It could have been 45 minutes to an hour.
Anyway.
So,
sorry, I sidetracked you there.
No, feel free. I'm just kind of rambling. But
yeah, you took the shuttle and you went to the hostel.
So I went to the hostel. So remember I said this is sort of like a critical point in the story of this is where this whole Kelowna trip, going to Kelowna with nothing more than 3 nights booked at a hostel, no plan other than my accommodations, and, carrying my life on my back, essentially, right? Literally. All my clothes, everything I needed was on my back.
Yeah.
And this is what really marks the journey, because here's what happened. I checked into my hostel, which was all a new experience. It's like, okay, what do I do? They handed me my bed sheets. And it's like, okay, what do I, so I'm making my own bed? Okay, right?
Yeah, that's a new concept for sure.
It was new to me at the time, right? I'm a newbie, right? I mean, I had stayed in a hotel in Las Vegas. I don't know. I probably stayed in other hotels as a kid, going places with my family, but I never had to make the bed. So I go upstairs to make the bed in my hostel, and I think there was either 6 beds or 8 beds in this dorm room. By the way, dorm rooms are the way to travel.
Yeah, hey?
Because you just meet so many amazing people. I mean, if I booked my time in a private room, I don't know where I'd be. I'd probably end up flying back to Ontario, right, and giving up altogether because I'd be so lonely. I don't know.
Yeah, I know, because traveling can be a lonely experience, right? This is something that's not often talked about. Maybe you touch on this later, but, when you're traveling solo, and you're in a country with a different language or a place that you're unfamiliar with, it really can be a lonely experience. So having those people around is definitely a benefit.
Absolutely. And this was exactly that. It was a solo trip. And, I'm 33 now. I'm 33 in a couple months. I spent all my 20s traveling. I traveled the world, and, I'll get into that. I've now been to 37 countries over all 7 continents. But it all starts with my solo trip to Kelowna.
With 3 nights in a hostel.
3 nights in a hostel, no plan. Yeah. And here's what happened. And I'll just touch on what happened here, and then maybe we can switch gears for a bit before I talk more about the rest of the journey. But what happened was, when I went up to make my bed, there was another guy in the room, a guy from Switzerland, and he was sitting on his bed on his laptop, and we just got talking. He's like, hey, we introduced ourselves. What are you doing here? Oh, I just booked a few nights here. I'm just here. I don't know. I don't have a plan. I don't want to travel. I do want to travel. I said I don't have. I meant to say I don't have any plans other than that I wanted to travel. Well, we spark up this conversation, and he tells me he has rented a van. He started in Vancouver. So he flew to Vancouver from Switzerland, he rented a van, and he drove eastward to Kelowna. This is where we met. And he had this plan that he was hoping to meet somebody along the way who could help split on the gas with him and just go on a little road trip. Doesn't have to be all the way. He's just hoping to meet people along the way. But he knew that he wanted to do a circuit. He wanted to go up through the Rockies, right up to the Yukon, over to Alaska, down the coast, right down the coast, and eventually get back to Vancouver.
Wow.
And he probably had 3 months of a trip from start to end. And when he asked me, what are you doing? And I said something along the lines of, well, I don't know. I want to travel. I really had no idea whatsoever. I probably told him that I thought I wanted to see these distant relatives of mine, which, by the way, I never ended up doing. I haven't seen them.
No way. Yeah.
I never
Yeah.
did see them again. Like,
Jeez.
I never saw them in Kelowna. I saw them a few years prior to that when they came out to Ontario to visit. But so when he asked me, what are you doing? And I didn't have a response. He goes, well, you're welcome to come with me. I mean, if you want to split on the gas, I was hoping to meet a Canadian. And I'm thinking to myself, he was 25 years old. I was 19 at the time. I'm thinking, can I trust this guy? Like,
Rob leaving on the side of the road. He's Swiss, Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I didn't even know. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know if I could find Switzerland on a map at that point because, I just passed geography class in grade 9. That was the last time I ever looked at a map or studied a map. Like, I was never really a geography buff, or I wasn't really interested in travel until, like I say, probably Las Vegas that sparked it in me, that I wanted to see new places. But prior to that, I mean, I wasn't studying geography. I wasn't, spinning a globe and, wondering where am I going to go. Because during my teens, I was, my head was in a different space.
Yeah.
It wasn't until I was 18, changing my life around, getting that desire to change my life, go somewhere new, be a new person, and so forth. But when this Swiss guy said to me, do you want to join? I said, well, why don't we hang out for a few days and, we'll see how it goes. I said, maybe I'll come as far as Banff with you because he mentioned he wanted to go to Banff. And I'm like, yeah,
Right.
I heard of Banff. So long story short, just to sort of tell you where this is going, we hung out for a few days, went out for drinks and this and that. And we met other people as well because we had other roommates that eventually came into our dorm room. And the day before he left, he says to me, have you made up your mind? Because tomorrow I'm leaving. And I said, you know what, I'll come. I'll come as far as Banff anyway.
Wow.
And we ended up on a road trip together for 2.5 months.
No way.
Yeah.
Wow.
2.5 months, living out of his van, sharing a bed in the back of his van.
What was this van like? Sorry, just for me and for our listeners here. So was it like a rental cargo van with a mattress in the back, or is it like an RV? Or?
Exactly. It was a Chevy rental, bed in the back. It was rented fully stocked. So it had the mat. It had everything. I mean, it had a big like a jug for water. It had.
Cool.
Oh, I don't know if it came with a. It might have came with a cooler actually, because I know he had a big cooler in the back, and I don't think he bought it. Everything came. It might have even had blankets, to be honest. I mean, it had an axe.
An axe?
He didn't have to buy. It had an axe.
Wow.
So he didn't have to buy an axe. When we were chopping firewood, we always had an axe. I mean, It really came fully stocked.
Wow.
It was great. I mean, he paid money for that to rent it.
Yeah, I'm just sure if you rent something like that. Again, I'm picturing a converted cargo van, but it sounds like it's something a bit more along the lines of an RV. But
well, yeah, I didn't even know they did it. I mean, I've never even looked into it since. He just told me he rented like that, which was perfect. I don't know where he rented it from. So I don't know if it's a niche market, a niche rental market or not, but.
Because I met a German backpacker when I rented a place when I first moved to Victoria. My landlord / roommate would always have backpackers. So we had Germans one week and Russians another week and Brazilians another week. And the Germans always had these, they always want to see the mountains, drive around, see all of the country, right? Drive down to Toronto, 2 days kind of thing. It's sort of different geography here in Canada, right? We're just so much larger than Europe. And but they always had these cargo vans, and they would just throw a mattress in the back. And then when my wife and I went on a trip to the prairies a few years back, we had bought a van from a guy who had actually converted it as a minivan, and he had put a bed inside, a folding bed with cupboards and all sorts of stuff, so we could put our portable stove in there. So I mean, there's all these neat little models of different ways of traveling affordably on wheels, like without the big RV that burns, a ton of gas.
Yeah, very, very true. Like this was a great option.
Yeah, and they wanted you to help them with the gas kind of thing. That was it, hey?
Yeah.
Wow.
That was it. So he never asked for money to help, pay for the cost of the rental.
Wow.
But and you know what? He never knew how long I would be, sharing the van with him.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, maybe if he knew at the outset, he would have taken some upfront payment, hey? 2.5 months in, but yeah.
Yeah, well, either way, like whether he met people to join him or not, he was still going. He was still doing it.
That's cool.
Yeah, and so it was absolutely incredible. I mean, we're sharing a bed in the back of this van. We're picking up hitchhikers. We're
every mother's wish for her son, hey, on a backpacking trip at 19. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, but it was incredible. I mean, we did go to Banff. We went right up to the Rockies, Yukon, Alaska,
Wow.
down the coast, and we ended up finishing our trip in Victoria, BC, which is where I live now. And I remember because he had to go back to Vancouver to catch his flight home. But I don't even know. I couldn't even sum that whole trip up into a few sentences. I mean, the adventures that we had, the people that we met, a lot of the hitchhikers, we picked up, I remember, a German guy and a Brazilian guy. I'm trying to think because there was a couple Germans. There was a German guy and a Brazilian guy.
Had to be an Aussie in there somewhere.
Yeah, you think so, but actually there probably was along the way, but a hitchhiker, I don't know. But then there was like a couple other German guys that we picked up. I met a lot of Germans. I've always somehow attracted Germans into my life. I have a lot of German friends, but especially when traveling.
Yeah,
you meet them.
Definitely.
But we stayed really good friends. So of these 4 hitchhikers, I guess, that I'm thinking of, we remained very, very close friends. I mean, we ended up having a 10-year reunion.
Wow.
10 years after this trip in southern Germany.
No way.
With a core group of us that met on the road.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean.
See, yeah. And that's the part, MJ, that, people don't talk about with travel, right? Like, it's the pictures, it's the Instagram shots, it's the old cathedral, but like the networking, the international friendships, connections, relationships. I mean, for me and for the listeners, like, are you still in touch with these people? Obviously, a 10-year reunion. Like, do you stay with these people when you go traveling? Do you meet up with them?
I am. Like, well, this sort of core group that I call it, who met on that trip, hitchhiking, and we spent time camping. I mean, for a while, there was 3 of us in a bed. Me, the Swiss guy, and a German guy. We're all straight guys, too, and I only mention that because it's not like, they were looking for a pickup or something. Mm-hmm. We're not snuggling up either. We are like, we're kind of sitting there like trying not to touch each other, but we can't help but touch each other because we're 3 in a bed. It was
in a small van.
Yeah, and we're having a great time. Nothing but laughs and like stinking socks hanging from the windows.
I was gonna say, it smells, man.
Yeah. Like so much laughter and adventure and so much fun. And yeah, this sort of core group of us, we have a WhatsApp group. So we do stay in touch. We stay in touch. Yep. Pretty close. But then I have friends all over the world that I met along the way. Friends, I couldn't even begin to tell stories of, how I met people. I'd end up sleeping on people's couches, families taking me in, sleeping at airports and bus stations and all kinds of wild stories. But, like Kelowna was the start of it all. And as I said, although that Kelowna trip it paused for a bit in Victoria, since then I never stopped. I kept on going through my 20s.
Yeah, so what happened, don't leave us hanging. So when you guys got to Victoria, did he take the van back with him to Vancouver and, return it to the rental place, or did he have you do that, or did he sell you the van, or, I guess he was renting it, so. But what happened?
It probably would have been more affordable, actually, for him had he bought the van and then sold it on the other end. A lot of people do that, and it's I shouldn't say most often, but it's often a more affordable way to go. But in any case, renting it worked well because he did drive it back to Vancouver and just dropped it off and, took off, caught his flight. Whereas I decided to stay in Victoria for a little bit.
What about what was it about Victoria, our beautiful city here, that drew you?
Well, it's funny you ask that because when we ended up in Victoria, I was beginning to feel a little bit depressed because the mountains weren't as big.
Wow.
We were coming from the Rockies, Alaska, and then down the coast. And when we got to Victoria, I'm thinking, we're in a city. I actually, the beauty didn't, I wasn't in awe of the beauty right away, like I eventually was. It was more like, oh no, we're in a city. We're moving away from the beautiful countryside into a city, and the mountains are smaller, and like the ocean though was incredible seeing that. But we ended up in a hostel here in Victoria before he had to go to Vancouver, and I decided to stay in the hostel for a few weeks. I think I was there 3 weeks total.
Wow.
Because at this point, I'd spent a bunch of money. I think it was about $4,500, if I remember correctly, that I spent. So remember I saved about $9,500, and I dropped about 4.5 on this trip. One part I forgot to mention, actually, speaking of money, when I left my small town, when I left Toronto to fly to Kelowna, at the airport in Toronto, I said to my mom, when you get home, look up in your light fixture in your bedroom above your bed. And she's like, okay. She goes home. What I left for her was an envelope with $1,000 cash.
Wow.
And a bunch of little small notes, or like little letters. Instead of just one letter, I wrote a bunch of small ones.
Wow.
And and I don't remember everything that I said to her, but I do remember saying that this money is my way of showing appreciation for all the years you've looked after me. And I said I want you to use this money for your vacation when you take a vacation next.
Wow.
Because I knew she needed a vacation. I mean, busy mom, 5 kids. Yeah. I mean, chaos growing up. Like, she needed a vacation. And I couldn't leave home without, giving her a kiss goodbye. The best way to give her a big hug and a big kiss is like, by the way, here's $1,000. Take a vacation.
I'm sure any moms out there listening right now are having a few, cutting a few onions there. Definitely some crying going on. So yeah, that's really interesting. That's really nice.
Yeah, so I left Toronto. I remember it was 8,000 something because I'd spent 1,000. And I remember thinking, like, how, what can I leave her as a gift? $100, $200 I'm like,
keep going.
Yeah, exactly. I just remember
this is your mom.
$1,000.
Yeah.
And I'm doing it with cash, so it just gives it more of an effect, right? As opposed to a check. So, so that was the money I'm working with, and it's important I mention that though because people often wonder about how do I afford travel and how much do I need to do this. Well, this trip, as I said, so let's say I left Toronto with about $8,500. I spent about $4.5 on the road trip. So now I'm down to what? What's 8.5 minus 4.5? 4,000.
4,000, yeah.
Right.
Not bad.
Yeah, so not bad. So I'm in Victoria, right? My money's running short. Well, the hostel I was staying at offered work for stay, where all you have to do is go to reception and say, "Hey, I'm interested in cleaning, making beds and scrubbing toilets for free accommodation."
And for those of us who know Victoria, I mean, there's only 2 places this could really be. My money's on Ocean Island.
You got it.
All right.
You got it.
Work.
There's not too many of them in town.
Yeah, and the other one's the Turtle. Was it the Turtle Island? The one on Quadra.
Turtle Hostel, yeah, which is notoriously bad. There were so many bad stories, and I shouldn't be maybe bashing a business, but I mean, I heard nothing but horror stories about that place. So I never, and I've stayed in bad hostels.
Okay, we'll save that for another podcast. But
yeah,
so the Ocean Island allows people staying there to work, and is it like 100% or is it like 80%? Like you work like how many hours? Like you work 20 hours at the front desk and you get 100%, covered? Or
it was, from what I remember, it was I worked 6 hours a day. I'm trying to think. 6 hours a day. Was it it might have been 6 days a week as well.
Wow.
And then I would get 7 nights free because I think I got a free night in there.
Is that like dollar for dollar, like at minimum wage kind of thing? Like that's 36 hours a week. That's quite a bit. Like I was just picturing, 15, 20 hours, serve some coffee, fill out some forms for people, fold some sheets. But this is like this is like a full-time job.
Well, it is, and they didn't pay me. It was just work for stay, so my accommodation was paid for.
Right.
Now, I don't know, they might have paid me what they called Ocean Island dollars at the time. I don't know if that existed at the time because I had stayed in that hostel since. Like, years later even, I stayed in the hostel and they came up with these Ocean Island dollars. They may have paid me a little bit because I can't recall if they had their bar cafe area open at the time, but I remember seeing Ocean Island dollars. But in any case, it would have been very, very small. I mean, I was just working for a stay, but I was saving money on accommodation, so I didn't have that stress anymore.
Yeah, I'm just like the my business mind is trying to add up 36 hours times blah blah blah. Let's say it was like I moved to Victoria in 2013. And minimum wage was $10.45 an hour. So in 2007, 2008, it probably would have been about $8, $9 an hour maybe. So you'd be looking at
it was probably around that. Yeah,
maybe $300 a week, something like that.
Maybe, whoever the math works. Either way, it's not like it's really not worth it. When you do the work for stay thing, I mean, it's much better for them. Let's put it that way. It's much better for them. But the benefit being a backpacker and doing the work for stay, there is one benefit, and that is you don't need a resume. You don't have to go look for a job.
Right.
You start tomorrow. And
you can roll out of bed and start your shifts, kind of thing too.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so for the people listening, anyone coming to Victoria or new to Victoria, or I guess obviously with our situation now, Ocean Island's probably pretty full. We have very low vacancy rate in town here, but that is an option for travelers. And also, is it for international travelers, or is that eligible for them? Can they work for, I suppose if it's Ocean Island dollars, it's technically not an official job, so they could work for their accommodation.
They must allow for international travelers because I know I've also worked in Australia in a hospital doing just the work for stay thing,
right.
And this just adds to the benefit for travelers. Is if you're international, you don't have a work visa,
exactly,
and you just want to save. You want to stay in Victoria for a week or 2 weeks, but you don't want to pay for accommodations. You want to save a little bit of money there. Well, if you don't mind working for 6 hours in the morning, then it's actually, it's great. You do some work. It feels good. You feel productive. It forces you to get out of bed early. And like I said, you don't need a resume. You don't have to look for a job, this and that.
And you're meeting people. You're meeting people the whole time.
Oh, yeah. Oh, meeting people. And if you love to party, every day is a party,
Yeah.
Every day is a party. You're always meeting people. I mean, you want to do the pub crawl thing every day. You meet such quality people because when people are on holidays, people just want to have fun.
That's right.
I mean, you have wicked parties in hostels, especially in dorm rooms. You just have an amazing time because everybody's there for a good time.
Well, so let's sidebar for a second. So we have talked about some of the benefits of hostels. Me, myself, as I've gotten older, obviously, and having a family, 2 young kids, I don't think a dorm room is an option for us. But even as I got to be a bit older, I started to sort of, sharing, a room with, say, 3 or 4 complete strangers, right? Like, does stuff go, like, do you have any bad experiences? Like, is it, does stuff get stolen? Does someone kind of like clamber into the room at 3 a.m, stinking like a brewery and vomiting on the floor? Like, there's obviously the benefits of meeting people and stuff, which is exactly why, I think people should travel in the first place, right?
But those are great questions, especially since I've met so many people that are afraid to stay in hostels. And it's often because they saw this horror movie called Hostel, which I never saw. Have you seen it?
I have not, but I'm thinking I should watch it, or I shouldn't watch it. No.
I should almost watch it just to
see what else
understand the fear that people got from it.
Right.
But I guess there was this horror movie, filmed took place in a hostel, people getting killed and that kind of thing.
Right.
So I remember, especially, I don't know when this movie came out, but there was a lot of fears. Now, have I had, some crazy things happen with hostels, things getting stolen, that kind of thing? I definitely have a lot of stories. I've stayed in probably over 100 hostels. I feel like I might have counted it someday, or it's up there. So I've had a lot of different experiences. I mean, I remember, I don't know if it was Portugal or Spain, but I came back to my room one night drunk, as you do, and there was people having sex in my bed.
Wow.
Yeah, that was one time, and it was a room. I remember now. I think it was Madrid, Spain. But there was 15, or no, there must have been 16 beds. So like eight bunk beds, so like 16 beds. And I came back, and they were having sex in my bed, and I remember saying something to them. And
what do you say? What do you say in those situations? And you're half drunk too, right?
You're having sex in my bed. I didn't even care. I thought it was awesome,
Yeah.
So I just remember the girl just put the blanket over her. Yeah. I'm like, all right. I just hopped on any other empty bed and slept there the night. So I don't know whose bed I was in, and that wouldn't have been the first time I slept in someone else's bed. But oh my God, I remember in London, England. This one, I was in a big room, a lot of people snoring. I remember it was really loud, noisy. There must have been like 12 beds or more. And I came back, I think it was about 2 in the morning. I must have been out for a night on the town. And there was a homeless person in my bed, reeked of alcohol, just reeked. I think it was that beer smell you were describing, just reeked. And all my stuff is on my bed, my backpack, my toiletries kit, like my toothbrush bag, all that stuff. And he's just sleeping on the bed with all my stuff, and it was the top bunk. I remember that.
Now, was this worse than the 2 people having sex on your bed?
This was worse.
Okay.
This was worse because there was no other beds I could take.
Right.
I was tired because actually I was really tired. Really, really tired. When I ended up in London, England, I flew from Morocco. I got really bad food poisoning in Morocco to the point I couldn't take care of myself, and I had to fly anywhere outside of Morocco because I'm like, I don't want to go to the hospital here.
Yeah.
And I said, I need to get a flight anywhere. I was looking everywhere. Okay, I was looking at South America. I remember I was looking everywhere for a cheap flight that I could fly like the next day.
Yeah.
And I even looked at flights back to Toronto. I mean, this is a whole other trip when I was in Europe. But
I don't want to know how that flight was, man. Oh God, can't imagine.
Well, you know what? Oh, it was horrible. But the cheapest flight I could find anywhere within Europe, South America, everywhere, happened to be London, England.
That's not bad. English speaking. If you got to go to a hospital, it's relatively familiar.
Yeah, and this was like a really big trip I did through Europe, and when I got in Morocco, I was on the road for over 3 months.
Wow.
In non-English speaking countries. So to fly to London was a blessing to be, to be able to speak English again. It just felt good.
Especially when you're not feeling 100%, right?
Well, exactly. I was feeling horrific. Like just the fact I made it to the airport, the fact I had to sleep on a hostel rooftop.
Oh, geez.
I was on a hostel rooftop in Morocco for 24 hours sleeping under the stars because I was in so much pain. I could not move. Could not move. But I ended up going to London. I spent 24 hours at London Heathrow Airport sleeping on the floor, in many different places on the floor because security kept, sweeping everybody up. And when I got out of that airport, when I was finally feeling well enough to get out of the airport, and remember, I was just in Morocco. I mean, so all this time had gone by. I'm really, really sick. And I get to London, and this was the first night. And I remember, this drunk homeless person being in my bed, and I'm thinking, I don't have the energy to deal with this right now.
That's an understatement. Oh, geez. The timing, hey?
Yeah,
Do they have
Yep.
security at these hospitals sometimes? Like the front desk or the front desk can do
Um,
something? Or what do you do in a situation like that?
well, in this case, I went down to reception. I said, there's a drunk homeless person in my bed, sleeping with all my stuff. Everybody's snoring. I can't sleep. I'm still suffering from food poisoning. I remember now. I was really in rough shape. Like I was just starting to eat again,
Yeah.
like barely eat again.
After like
And
3-4 days of probably not eating much, losing all your fluids and stuff too.
yeah, it was
Yeah.
probably about that because I remember being really ill for a week.
Wow.
So there very well could have been 3-4 days of like not eating or hardly eating. Um, so what they did is I I remember going up there and I said something pretty harsh, but I was like, get out of my bed. Yeah. Like, because I think the first time it didn't work. Yeah, the first time it didn't work. And then when I think I had somebody come with me from reception and
Right.
together we got him out of bed.
Wow.
And then I was able to, first of all, check that nothing was stolen of mine.
Yeah.
And then they ended up moving me to another dorm room that had maybe 2 to 4 other people. And it was the best thing ever because um, nobody was snoring. And like I could breathe. It didn't stink in that room.
The simple things, eh? Yeah.
Oh, it was beautiful. I remember going to that room. It felt, and I think they gave me new bed sheets. Yeah, they did. They gave me new bed sheets.
You're trying to sell us on dorm rooms here. Hospitals. They gave me new bed sheets. Yeah.
Well, it's funny,
Yeah.
right now I'm focusing on, the negative,
Yeah,
the
no, I
negative
hear you.
stuff.
But this is good, right? We need to hear the other side. This is important. So, yeah.
It's true. And, there was one time actually that I was robbed. One time, and it was in a dorm room, not in a hostel though. It was like a sketchy place above a pub. It was Christmas Day or Christmas Eve or Christmas or New Year's, one or the other. This was in Australia of all places, in Sydney, Australia. And it was like they had dorm rooms, but above this pub. It wasn't really hostel. It was just accommodations. And it was just me and this other guy who seemed like he couldn't hurt a fly. He seemed like he was like, had some, he seemed slower. Like he just didn't seem like he was all there.
Right.
But also it just seemed like he couldn't hurt a fly. And well, that was just another story where I woke up and I went across the hall just to use the washroom. It was, sometime early in the morning. I was gone 20 seconds. And normally I would always bring my wallet because, yes, theft does happen. You never want to go anywhere without your wallet or your valuables when you're staying in a hostel. And I'm like, well, I'll just pop out the door for literally 20 seconds. Came back, and he was jumping off my bed. And I'm so tired. It's like, did I see him jumping off my bed? Yeah. Like
Right.
I look at my bed, my wallet's open. He took some cash. I forget how much. But no credit cards are missing. I yelled at him. We got like this heated argument, and he was acting crazy, like just mentally gone.
Right.
And he threatened to stab me with a knife and
Wow.
whatever. And then I just grabbed all my stuff. I remember I had more stuff in a locker there. I remember I had to open up my locker to get stuff. And you might be asking, why wasn't my wallet locked up? Well, I was actually sleeping with it under my pillow in my pants. And I left and told the receptionist, and then we went up together. This guy was long gone. He stole some cash. I think it was less than $100, whatever it was, but I had all my credit cards. This was like within my first week of being in Australia, and I was there for like 8 months. So this is the beginning of a longish trip. But other than that, I've been lucky. There's a lot of great stories about being in hostels. Nothing but fun parties, music playing. Sometimes you can sleep. Other times you can't. You have to deal with people snoring. Sometimes you find a quiet hostel. You can find those out there, and that's where you get a good night's sleep.
Would you say you've stayed in hostels? Like if you had to put a percentage on it, then say you mentioned when you contacted me, you've been to, or you just mentioned two to us here, 37 countries. Of the 37
Yeah.
countries that you traveled to, have you stayed in hostels? What, 90% of the time, 80% of the time?
Probably say like as high as 99 because
Wow.
yeah, they were always hostile. They were always hostile. Oh well, other than hostels, I did a lot of traveling carrying around a tent, so I camped out a lot of places. I met people and I stayed on some couches. I slept in airports, a lot of airports, bus stations, train stations. I slept on a picnic table outdoors in Australia. Woke up to a possum hanging by its tail above my head off
No
a
way.
tree.
Huh.
Good thing I didn't die that night of being, choked by a snake,
Yeah.
which is a very real risk. But yeah, but I guess, I was thinking 99% versus hotels because really I didn't travel in hotels. I mean, my luxury trip down to Antarctica, as they call it, was a luxury trip. The package that I got, it actually included a 5-star hotel for a night in Buenos Aires.
Wow.
So I mean, that was a time I stayed in the hostel. But yeah, if I wasn't in a hostel, I was in a tent or sleeping in the back of his van. I spent a month with a guy sleeping in the back of his van in Australia. And I should mention just briefly that when I ended up in Victoria after this road trip, 2.5-month road trip,
Mm-hmm.
and I was doing a work for stay, I met a guy, a French Canadian guy, who saw me working, and he said, "I've seen the way you work, and I've seen the way you work, and you look like a good worker. I'm going to go work on an island in between here and Vancouver on a vineyard, and I think you would be really good, and I know they could use people."
Wow.
And he's like, "You should just come with me, like they'll hire you." So I did. I went to work on this vineyard, and I worked hard for 2.5, 3 months. I made all my money back, plus maybe more. I
Wow.
might have made like $5,000 there. So after a few months of work, well, okay, let's say 3 weeks working at the hostel, another 3 months on the vineyard. So, just say 3 months. Like it was less than 4 months, and I was taken off to New Zealand. So I got New Zealand off list
Yeah.
and Australia.
Wow.
And after Australia, I went to Newfoundland, then back to Toronto to visit family, and then back to Victoria. So that whole trip from Kelowna back to Victoria, that whole trip was 15 months. 15 months backpacking and only 3 months and 3 weeks working, plus 2.5 months working in Australia.
Wow.
So just say, less than 6 months work out of 15 months backpacking.
Yeah.
So you can just see how far my money went, how far I was able to stretch it.
Definitely. Wow. That's an art.
It is
That's
an art. You could, and I haven't stopped since. I just began focusing on, prioritizing. It was really about prioritizing.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of spending money on, expensive clothes or going out drinking every Friday night or, a million other ways I could spend my money on, I was focused on stocking it away for my next trip
Right.
and my next trip and my next trip. And that was just and my rent was always cheap. I always had roommates, always, never lived on my own. And I was finding accommodations I remember in Australia, I spent a month picking apples and I was staying at a campsite and my accommodations were $60 a week in Australian dollars,
Wow.
which was actually about on par with Canadian dollars. So just say 60 a week. Well, 60 times 4 is $240 a month. I mean, $240 a month, I'm living it up on this beautiful campsite. Nice facilities there, shared kitchen, this and that, making a killing, a small, I thought was a killing at the time, picking apples. I was doing well. Worked for a month, boom, I'm on the road again. I've made my money, I've saved money on accommodations, and I've hit the road, and I just kept going that way and kept going. And this desire to travel and to see the world kept getting bigger and bigger. And it was my mission to see the world. It was actually like a bucket list goal for me because remember I was saying when I was 18 years old, I had just started turning my life around, wanted to build a new life for myself.
Mm-hmm.
Well, my ultimate goal was happiness. I wanted to find happiness and fulfillment in my life. And to do that, a big part of doing that was I need to see the world, because this is my bucket list thing. Like, what do I want to do before I die? I want to see the world. Like, I want to go scuba diving in the Great Barrier Reef. I did that. I want to go skydiving. I did that. I want to go see the desert, go to the jungle, go to the Great Wall of China, the Taj Mahal in India. All these things I was doing, and I kept doing it because they were fulfilling my desire. They fulfilled what my definition of happiness and fulfillment was.
Right.
Which I defined as, doing the things that made me happy, living the best life possible, and having great relationships on the way. And I made great relationships along the way, great adventures that I wouldn't take back for the world, or that I wouldn't give up for the world, I should say.
Yeah. Well, I have nothing to say. That is just, yeah, it sums it all up so nicely.
Well, it's like I can talk for hours and hours because I get so excited by it, but I also like to listen too. So, I mean, I could just sit down and talk travel with someone all day because I just get so excited by it. It makes me want to keep on going. I find that for a person who wants to do what I've done, let's say, for a person who wants to travel, they want to see the world, and maybe they might have challenges like, well, how do I afford it? I don't have any money, or I have a little bit of money. How far can I go? I would say to these people that the number one thing you need to do is you need to prioritize travel in your life, if that's what you want.
So skip the Friday nights out, or, go out for one drink instead of, 3 pitchers, and, maybe you don't go to that baseball game or that concert, just kind of.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
it's really about making it a priority and doing the things that you have to do to make it possible. So I'll just share one example here is, I've heard the complaint from people, well, like, I'm having a hard time saving. I just can't save to take these trips. It's like, well, where are you living? Oh, well, I rent my own apartment. I pay this much. It's like, well, why aren't you sharing a room in a house for $400, $500 a month? Or, it's gone up significantly up nowadays, but why aren't you doing the things you need to do to make it possible? I mean, when I ended up in Victoria the second time after the big 15-month trip, I ended up living in a drug house. Actually, it was a really bad drug house.
Oh no!
And I
laugh because I was like, how do you fall into these things? Like, just 2.5 months with a Swiss guy in a van and drug house in Victoria. Like, how do you end up in a drug house? Like, how do you go from a backpacking, working on a vineyard to a drug house in Victoria?
Well, like I said, it's one grand adventure. I mean, there's so many places I found myself in along the way, whether good or bad or in between. Well, I knew somebody at the time who said, I have a room in this house that's available. And so I said, okay, well, I'd run out of money by this point after this 15 months. And I said, I'll take it, right? It was $333 a month, which even at that time was really great, because if you wanted to rent a room anywhere else, you're looking at definitely over 500, like 500 to 600 easy for a bedroom to share. And $330 was like, I can do this. Well, who lived in this room before me? A snake.
What?
It was the snake room. They had a snake living in this room. It was a dinky tiny room. It did have a window, no closet. It was, and not everybody is maybe in that situation, right? I mean, if you can afford more, great. For me, I had to, live in the places I needed to live, do the things I needed to do, stay in the hostel, like, sleep in my tent, sleep in the back of vans or at airports. I had to do all these things to fulfill my big dream, because this did unfold to be a very big dream of mine, to see the world. And by traveling to all 7 continents, it was like it was a goal of mine to say, like, I've done it. You almost have to say, like, well, at which point have I accomplished my goal?
Right.
Yeah, I don't want to stop traveling, but that was, to hit all 7 continents was big for me. It was huge. And, I did have to make sacrifices along the way, such as, saying no to going out on a Friday night, or, saying no to living somewhere nicely to take a snake room for a couple of months in a drug house.
And then that's the word, sorry, sacrifices. That's what as you just said, it, sacrifices.
Sacrifice. It's actually a priority and sacrifices, because whenever we prioritize something, we're sacrificing something else.
Right.
If you have a kid and you prioritize spending time with your kid, right, and spending time with them for whatever reason, you're sacrificing spending time with your friends who might want to hang out. You're sacrificing time going out to social events because you need to be home for your kid. So it's about priorities and sacrifices. And there's more to it than that, but maybe I'm going off on a rant.
No, and with the ultimate objective of doing what makes you happy. That's the last part of that, I guess, right? And sort of that's the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. You make those sacrifices, you prioritize travel, and you get those happy moments. Like I can picture you in front of the Taj Mahal snapping pictures in, Morocco and Antarctica with the penguins. Like it's phenomenal.
It is. And, well, you said it yourself. Happiness is what it's about, because, well, it depends how you define happiness. Some people define it as it's maybe not as strong of a word to express, what they're doing in their life. For me, happiness and fulfillment is like the ultimate. We have one life, in this form, in this, I'm MJ, this is one life as MJ. I want to live my best life possible. Now, that doesn't mean I'm going to give up my sleep to be as productive as I can be and, do as much as I can do in this one life. No, I still love sleeping, and I'll sleep for 10 hours, and I'll enjoy every moment of it. But in my waking hours, I want to be doing these things that really fulfill me. So spending time with people I care about, seeing the world, not just talking about them or reading about them in a book. I want to do these things. And I would argue, we all need to have this sense of purpose. Like what are we living for? What is our purpose? What are we living for? What gets us out of bed in the morning? What gets us excited? What are we accomplishing here?
Right.
Right? And we have to define that all for ourselves. And I don't know, maybe I'm getting kind of philosophical. And, I'm not purpose. I hit these moments where I feel like, okay, I've accomplished my goals. Now I've arrived at this point in my life where it's like, I need some more goals. Otherwise, I'm kind of stuck, right? It's so easy for people to get stuck.
But isn't that the essence of travel? Like it gets you unstuck.
I think you hit the nail on the head, because yes, the feeling of moving on to the next place, moving on, always moving on. The moment you get bored of a place or you get bored of people, you're in the next city or the next country doing the next thing. And just to add a little bit more to that is when we're living our normal, everyday, mundane lives. Like I say mundane, I don't really mean that in a negative way. It's just that we get into a routine, right? Our work, family routine, and that's great. I mean, we're creatures of habit, and I love my creature comforts. But we all need, when we want our lives to change or to get better, if that's what we're in search of, is our lives getting better, we want to make the most of our lives. Well, that requires some kind of change or some kind of action.
Right.
Change and action, or you could argue, they can be synonyms, just in the sense that when you act on something, you're doing something different than you were a moment ago.
Exactly.
Because you're taking action, which is just a change from non-action. And it's a lot of, it's important for people to identify that in their own lives. Like, what is the action? What do I want, and what are the actions I need to take to fulfill my desires? It's all about fulfilling desires, having a purpose to fulfill this feeling inside of us that wants to live. Like it's like that feeling of wanting to live, feel happy and live a good life. And that's what I found in travel. I just found so much life and excitement this feeling of living and moving and taking action and ending up on these adventures. I mean, I couldn't even tell you. I've just forgotten so many adventures. I mean, um, I met a guy on a train in China, didn't speak any English. Next thing you know, I'm with him and the rest of his family who were in a different cart on the train. None of them spoke English. And we spent like a week together between two different cities. They were taking me out for meals. I mean,
Wow.
helping me find my accommodations. I spent 5 nights with a guy in New Zealand, German guy, didn't speak a word of English. I don't even know if he knew how to say hello. He could not speak any English. And I helped him open up a bank account in New Zealand. We slept in a tent together, a little like 1-person, 2-person tent.
Yeah.
While it rained for 5 days, we slept in the tent. I mean, there's so many things, and we just laughed. Me and him it was like body language. I don't know. Somehow we were able to communicate through body language and laughter. And it's like there's so many of these kinds of stories. I remember in Victoria, probably 3 years ago, I was in a random dollar store I'd never been to. I was looking for a birthday card. I just happened to be in this part of town. And I'm in there and I see this guy down an aisle, the same aisle, the card off. And I'm looking at him and he's looking at me and I'm just like, something tells me I've met this guy. And I said to him, you look familiar. Have we met before? And he's like, I don't know. You look familiar too. And we're listing everything. Like, is it our martial arts? Is it school? Is it this, that? We're thinking of every possible way we could know each other. We couldn't figure it out. And we're like, well, maybe we just have that familiar face, kind of left it at that. And then it hit me. I said, or no, it didn't quite hit me because what I said was, well, the only other thing is that, I was in China 6 months ago. Like, you couldn't have been in China 6 months ago. And he's like, yeah, I was in China 6 months ago. And I'm like, what? Like, this was the one thing we had in common, and we found it. And then that's when the light bulb went off. And I'm like, oh, my God. We were on the same Terracotta Warrior tours.
No way.
Or the Terracotta Warrior tour. It was him and his mom. And we met on this tour. It began on, like, the tour bus. It was like a tour van. And, I mean, this guy, I remember him telling me he lived in Switzerland, because he did. He actually lived in different parts of the world, and he traveled a lot with his family. And Victoria was just like another home base he had. And, this is months later, and it's like this guy I met in far western China. I spent 5 weeks backpacking all around China, and I met him, spent the whole day, well, the better part of the day with him and his mom. And then we said our goodbyes. Don't even know if we exchanged names. And here I am seeing him like months later in a random dollar store in Victoria. There was this girl, I remember one more quick one, is like I got off 24 hours of riding buses through Turkey. I was in central Turkey. I got on it was like the same bus, but 24 hours of travel. I get to Istanbul. It was really close to midnight, and I had to catch a subway train to the airport. I was trying to get to the airport to catch my flight to Rome. And I had no time to book accommodations because I was so busy in Turkey, and getting Wi-Fi and all the rest of it was difficult. And I ended up finding myself stranded. One person, I'm on my own. I'm in Istanbul. It's around midnight. The bus drops me off, and I'm like in this vacant parking lot. I'm like, where's the subway? I don't know. And nobody speaks English. I see this random elevator in this parking lot. I'm like, well, this could be it. I get in this elevator. It ends up taking me down to the underground subway train, and I get there, and there's like 2 other people like spread out in there waiting for a train. I'm like, I don't know if there's a train coming. Nobody in the world knows where I am right now. Nobody knows where I am. And I was just so lucky to get the last train that showed up, I think, about 20 minutes later, fortunately, because where would I be sleeping? I don't know. And I kept this train to the airport. I had to sleep on the airport floor, caught my flight to Rome. I'm so tired, but I couldn't sleep. Actually, I laid down on the floor in the airport, but I didn't sleep. I get to Rome. I get my bags. I have to catch this like 45-minute to an hour bus downtown. I had no accommodations booked. Now this story gets good. So, I get off the bus and I meet a couple who looked like they were going to stay somewhere. So I said, hey, do you have any accommodations booked? They said, yeah, we have an Airbnb. I said, do you mind if I follow you? Because maybe I'll find some accommodations on the way. And they're like, yeah, just like come with us. Well, they were locked out of their Airbnb. So I like, okay, nice meeting you guys. I got to go find a place to sleep. And I ended up finding a hotel that offered dorm rooms. So you still with me?
I'm still with you. On the edge of my seat.
Okay, well, this gets good. So hotels don't usually offer these like dorm-style rooms, but they did, and I'm the only one in this dorm room. I put my stuff down. I'm exhausted. I'm in Rome. Remember, 24 hours by bus through Turkey. And before the 24-hour bus ride, I mean, I was out on an adventure. I don't remember the last time I showered.
Right.
You know, I wasn't eating properly. I probably wasn't staying very well hydrated. And flying into another country, you better have accommodations booked in a lot of cases because they often ask for that.
Right. Good tip.
They often ask for you at least to give an address of where you're staying. I had none of that.
Right.
I was just lucky. I got into Italy. You know, I'm tired and this and that. I had no accommodations, and now I'm walking around downtown Rome. I find some accommodations, put my stuff down, and then I'm walking around Rome. And I'm getting hungry. Right? I was probably starving by this point. Well, I walk into this little dinky market, like a little dinky food market, because you see a lot of that, you know, in Europe. You don't always see those big grocery stores. You just see these little tiny markets.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm walking in there, and I'm in there and I hear MJ, turn around. This girl that I shared a room with, a dorm room in Greece, on the island of Crete, probably 2 weeks prior, we find each other in the same market in Rome.
That's unbelievable. Did she tell you that she was going to Rome?
I don't recall, to be honest. I don't recall her telling me she was going to Rome. I don't think so, because...
I mean, not to take away from the story, but it's just like, you know, like, did you guys, like, often when I've met people traveling, it's like, hey, where are you going after this? And, you know, maybe, maybe we should meet up over there. But you didn't have that conversation.
I don't think we had, you know. We definitely didn't have any, we didn't stay in touch. This time I didn't have a phone or anything, so, like, there was no way of communicating
Mm-hmm.
at the time for us. So it was a fluke. Now, you know, you might be thinking, well, okay, like, that is cool. It's a cool story that you met this person. You know, these things happen. I shared the story about the guy from China, but I'm telling you, like, it wasn't just, these things didn't just happen one or two times. These things have happened time and time again, and they only seem to happen, like, when I'm traveling. When I'm traveling, there's some kind of magic about traveling that
it really is.
It's crazy.
I've had that experience myself, and I've spoken with people who have had that experience, like a random airport, like Heathrow, and they'll see some guy they went to high school with. You know, like I was in downtown Montreal eating. This is my own story. I was in downtown Montreal eating at this outdoor patio, and this couple that I knew from Saskatoon walked by. Now I didn't know that they would be in Saskatoon. They were like acquaintances of my mom's, and just kind of like I had to look twice that it was actually them, and like they were the only two people on that stretch of sidewalk, and it was like 6 o'clock in downtown Montreal, and just so ran up and caught up with them, and we spent the evening together. Like it's just
I mean,
there's a magic to it for sure.
There is. Yeah. I don't know. Do you have any other questions for me?
I know we could talk for hours. I'm almost thinking we should definitely book you in for a part 2. Yeah, I mean, I think we've definitely covered a bunch of things that were on my list. And yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Like you say, there is room for a part 2 because.
Let's do it. We'll book it.
Yeah. Yeah. Because there's just so many other the questions maybe that, your listeners might be asking. Well, maybe he could talk more about, how he was able to afford it. Was there any any scary moments along the way, like things like bad things that happened?
Yeah.
Maybe that I didn't get into, or or just because there's so many trips in there. I mean, 37 countries, 7 continents. There's a lot of stories, but I think a lot of people are interested in hearing more about how I made it possible. I mean, I know I talked about setting priorities, making sacrifices, but I think one important point I should make is that I'm just your average guy. Like I didn't get any, I didn't get any inheritances. Like I didn't come from money. I started from scratch.
Right.
I consider myself lucky that I had some accommodations with my mom and my teens because it's like a base. But yeah, I think we can definitely get into some more details. Yeah.
Yeah, I
But
mean, the individual countries and places that you visit, like Antarctica, I mean, there's like a 30-minute conversation right there. Like the
oh my
penguins,
God.
the science station, the temperature. I mean, how do you pack for a trip like that? Just so many questions. So
And that was, I would say, my favorite trip. It's hard to say I have any favorites, but that was just a really special trip for me, and it's an incredible, incredible place. And that was actually a last-minute trip. 3 weeks before I left, that's when I got the trip. 3 weeks before, and
wow.
yeah. Um, so yeah, because there's ways, we could in our part 2 we could talk about travel hacking. This idea of like using credit card points and this and that. I mean, I've definitely gone that route to take advantage of like how can I travel more? How can I not, I don't like to say take advantage, but how do I use things that are out there to help me travel more?
Absolutely.
Right?
Those apps, right? There's those flight apps, that you can get cheap flights, those jumper
Yeah.
flights, or the ones in between layover flights, and like $100.
That's huge. That's a huge thing. Talking about finding the right value in flights. Yeah, we could go on and on about these things. How to find those good deals. Yeah, and what is a good deal? How do you know you're seeing one when you see one? And yeah.
I'm looking forward to part 2, and I'm sure the listeners are as well. So if you're listening, stay tuned. We will have a part 2 in the near future. So.
All right, perfect. I feel like, I'm happy to have been able to share my story. It's nice to be able to share. It's like goes back to the old days in elementary school, show and tell. It's like, it's always exciting to hear stories, and I want to hear other stories. So I'm looking forward to listening to some other stories.
Awesome. Well, definitely stay tuned. I do have lots in store coming down the pipeline, so lots of great stories. On the note of sharing and continued sharing, do you have any social media pages or a YouTube channel or things that you might like to share with our listeners about your travel adventures?
So I do have a Facebook page because I got into the travel vlogging as I was doing trips. I didn't like to do a lot of videos sort of in the moment, so you could see exactly what I was up to.
Yeah.
And that Facebook page is called Travel the World with MJ Sacco.
Travel the World with MJ Sacco. And did you want to spell your last name? Is that Sacco's your last name?
Sacco is my last name, Sacco.
Okay, everyone got
And now I haven't been active on it in a little while because my gears have kind of shifted. I'm, and especially with COVID right now, I mean, travel's been put on the back burner, but there's still a lot of content on there. Pictures. It's a good way to get connected with me if you wanted to. So you have my name. I'm on Facebook. So always happy to, answer people's questions, get connected, make new friends. So yeah.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much, MJ. That was very enlightening and informative.
It was. It was really nice chatting with you.
You as well.
Thanks for the opportunity.
My pleasure. And we'll talk again soon.
Talk soon. Until next time.
Until next time, take care.
Bye for now.
Bye.